Have you ever noticed how some people seem normal until that moment they cross the invisible line between admiration and obsession? How a friendly neighbor can be copying your keys, or how someone can literally be living inside your closet, waiting for the right moment. Tonight, 3 stories will show you that the most dangerous predators are those who gain legitimate access to our lives before revealing their true intentions. Imagine waking to noise in your closet and finding a woman with your tie around her neck and a knife in her hand. Or discovering your girlfriend installed hidden cameras in every room of your house. Or entering a loud party at 2 a.m. only to discover it's just a recording, while masked men work in the basement with intense bleach smell. You have 15 seconds to understand that some home invasions begin with smiles and copper keys, not broken windows. Garrett had lost his dormitory placement for sophomore year, forcing search for alternative accommodation that could fit student budget limitations while maintaining reasonable proximity to academic activities and university social life. The three-house co-op emerged as a viable solution despite inconvenient distance from main campus, offering affordable costs through shared housing model that distributed expenses among multiple residents, creating necessary economy for students with limited financial resources through this university co-op arrangement. The cooperative structure consisted of 3 separate residences inhabited primarily by current students, supplemented by alumni and older students who remained in area after academic completion, creating generational mixture that should provide mature community environment with guidance from experienced residents. The demographic diversity promised rich social environment while maintaining university connections through active members enrolled in current academic programs. The economically advantageous shared housing model required tolerance for lifestyle and behavioral diversity among residents of different ages, backgrounds, and academic commitments, creating potential for interpersonal conflicts through divergent expectations about cleanliness, noise, visitors, and communal space usage. The cooperative structure demanded social skills for navigating complex dynamics between varied personalities sharing intimate spaces, creating stalker vulnerabilities. Among residents, an older woman with mobility impairment immediately stood out through silent presence characterized by blank facial expression that violated normal social norms of emotional engagement and nonverbal communication. Her distinctive physical appearance combined with anomalous social behavior created memorable impression that other residents apparently had normalized through prolonged exposure and community acceptance of individual eccentricity. The persistent blank expression suggested either profound emotional disturbance or neurological condition affecting emotion processing, and appropriate facial expressions during social interactions. The absence of normal emotional signal created psychological discomfort in observers accustomed to interpreting mental states through facial cues, eliminating social feedback that normally guides appropriate interpersonal interactions and relational boundary establishment. Her mobility impairment manifested through obvious limp created apparent physical vulnerability that could mask actual capabilities or threatening intentions, enabling underestimation of potential danger by observers who equate physical limitation with incapacity for aggressive or violent behavior. The physical presentation could function as social camouflage, reducing appropriate defensive vigilance in shared environments. Consistent behavioral silence violated social expectations about conversational engagement and community participation, creating ghostly presence that inhabited shared spaces without normal social integration. The absence of verbal communication eliminated opportunities for rapport establishment or mutual understanding that normally would facilitate peaceful coexistence in shared housing environments, leaving motivations and mental state as disturbing mystery. Apparent acceptance of this anomalous presence by other residents suggested either normalization through prolonged exposure or community social pressure against questioning eccentric behavior that might violate cooperative norms about inclusion. And tolerance of individual diversity, creating an environment where warning signs about potentially dangerous behavior was systematically ignored through inadequate social conditioning, creating obsession vulnerabilities. Her lingering presence in Garrett's house kitchen, despite residing in different cooperative buildings, violated territorial norms that typically govern shared housing arrangements where residents maintain primary presence in their designated spaces. The cross-house intrusion suggested either confusion about boundaries or deliberate territorial violation designed to establish presence in spaces where she lacked legitimate residential claim, creating surveillance opportunity while testing community tolerance for boundary violations. The absence of cooking or conversation during kitchen occupation eliminated functional justification for presence, revealing pure observation behavior that transcended normal communal space usage patterns. Her stillness during extended kitchen vigils created unnatural atmosphere where normal domestic activities became performances under unwanted scrutiny, transforming routine tasks into sources of anxiety through sustained attention from expressionless observer. The watching behavior specifically directed toward Garrett rather than general kitchen observation indicated targeted surveillance, suggesting either random fixation selection or systematic evaluation that identified him as optimal obsession target through characteristics he displayed during normal activities. The specific attention created personal threat dimension that transcended general social awkwardness into territory of potential stalking behavior requiring defensive responses. Other residents' apparent indifference to her watching behavior suggested either community normalization of a presence or deliberate avoidance of confrontation that might disrupt cooperative harmony through acknowledgement of problematic behavior patterns. Their ignoring response created isolation for Garrett, whose concerns lacked social validation, forcing individual navigation of threatening situation without community support or collective protective intervention. The kitchen selection as observation post provided optimal surveillance position for monitoring resident activities during vulnerable domestic moments, including meal preparation, late-night snacking, and casual social interactions. The location choice demonstrated either intuitive or calculated understanding of information-rich environments where target behaviors reveal personal patterns useful for obsessive knowledge accumulation and future action planning. Garrett's growing awareness of being specifically watched activated primitive threat detection systems while creating psychological burden through constant awareness of hostile observation during routine activities. The targeted surveillance transformed domestic security into ongoing source of anxiety while forcing hypervigilance during moments that should provide relaxation and privacy within residential environments supposedly protected by cooperative community norms. The expressionless observation style prevented normal social resolution through confrontation or communication that might clarify intentions or establish appropriate boundaries. Her blank effect eliminated opportunities for normal interpersonal negotiation while maintaining threatening ambiguity about motivations and potential escalation trajectories, forcing Garrett into defensive posture without clear understanding of specific threats requiring mitigation. The boundary crossing from a designated residence into Garrett's building represented systematic territorial expansion that suggested either organic escalation of obsessive fixation or planned campaign designed to establish presence justification for future violations. The pattern indicated progressive rather than static threat requiring escalating defensive responses beyond simple avoidance or social negotiation that proved ineffective against the persistent intrusions. Garrett's nighttime discovery of her standing in middle of street staring up at his window represented dramatic escalation from indoor observation to outdoor surveillance that eliminated any remaining ambiguity about stalking intentions. The public display demonstrated either complete disregard for social norms or mental state so disturbed that normal behavioral constraints no longer regulated her actions, indicating dangerous psychological deterioration requiring immediate intervention. Her positioning in street center rather than sidewalk shadow indicated deliberate visibility choice designed either to ensure target awareness or surveillance or demonstrate obsessive dedication that transcended concern for personal safety or social propriety. The exposed positioning suggested psychological state where obsession importance exceeded self-preservation instincts that normally prevent such public displays of abnormal behavior. His wave response represented attempt to normalize bizarre encounter through social gesture that might diffuse tension or establish communication bridge for boundary discussion. The greeting gesture demonstrated Garrett's continued hope for rational resolution despite mounting evidence that normal social mechanisms couldn't address a disturbed behavioral patterns requiring professional intervention rather than interpersonal negotiation. Her excited running response to his wave indicated interpretation of acknowledgement as encouragement or reciprocation rather than defensive social gesture, revealing delusional thinking patterns that transform neutral actions into validation of imagined relationship. The enthusiasm demonstrated cognitive distortions characteristic of erotomania or obsessive attachment, where normal social interactions become incorporated into fantasy relationship narrative regardless of actual interpersonal dynamics. Housemates' dismissive responses characterizing her as always been around revealed dangerous community normalization that enabled ongoing stalking through collective denial about threat severity. Their historical contextualization suggested prolonged tolerance of problematic behavior that should have triggered protective interventions, but instead became accepted environmental feature through habituation and conflict avoidance that prioritized community harmony over individual safety. The university linkage mentioned by housemates provided institutional validation that complicated protective responses by suggesting official sanction or awareness of her presence. The academic connection created ambiguity about whether her access represented legitimate institutional relationship or exploitation of university affiliation for stalking purposes, paralyzing defensive responses through confusion about appropriate channels for intervention. The not-violent characterization represented dangerously inadequate threat assessment that confused absence of previous physical assault with safety guarantee despite escalating boundary violations indicating progressive threat trajectory. The reassurance ignored well-documented patterns where obsessive stalking escalates to violence when psychological satisfaction from surveillance no longer suffices, requiring physical contact or harm to maintain obsessive fulfillment. The advice to ignore her represented fundamentally flawed defensive strategy that confused avoidance with safety while failing to address underlying psychological dynamics driving stalking behavior. The passive response recommendation enabled continued escalation by providing no negative consequences for boundary violations while denying victim agency to implement active defensive measures that might deter further intrusions through clear rejection or intervention requests. Her appearance outside Garrett's bedroom door after midnight represented complete territorial violation that eliminated any remaining safe spaces within residential environment. The nighttime timing coincided with maximum vulnerability periods when reduced consciousness and isolation create optimal conditions for predatory approaches, demonstrating either intuitive or calculated understanding of victim psychology and residential security weaknesses exploitable during late-night hours. Multiple odd snooping incidents created a pattern of escalating intrusions that suggested systematic boundary testing designed to evaluate defensive responses and identify optimal approaches for achieving whatever objectives drove her obsessive focus. The repeated violations indicated that previous tolerance or inadequate responses had encouraged rather than deterred continued boundary crossings, creating positive reinforcement cycle that accelerated threat trajectory. Garrett's room key disappearance represented critical security breach that eliminated physical barriers protecting personal space and possessions from unauthorized access. The theft indicated premeditation and planning capability that transcended opportunistic boundary violations into calculated campaign requiring forethought about obtaining access tools necessary for achieving more intimate intrusions into private spaces protected by individual locks. Each bedroom's individual lock system should have provided personal security layer beyond communal space protections, creating sanctuary space impenetrable without explicit permission. The lock circumvention through key theft revealed sophisticated threat escalation that specifically targeted personal security measures, indicating obsessive determination to achieve physical proximity regardless of obvious rejection signals conveyed through lock barriers. Night noise from closet represented ultimate boundary violation, where Stalker achieved complete penetration of residential defenses to occupy most intimate storage space within bedroom sanctuary. The closet invasion demonstrated extraordinary intrusion capability while creating maximum psychological trauma through violation of space containing personal possessions and vulnerable sleeping position proximity creating absolute security failure. Opening closet to discover her inside wearing his tie around neck while holding kitchen knife created nightmarish confrontation combining multiple violation elements including property theft, weapon possession, and symbolic strangulation imagery. The tie placement suggested either suicide ideation, sexual fetish behavior, or threatening symbolism about control and possession, indicating severely disturbed psychological state requiring immediate emergency intervention. Her lunging attack response when discovered eliminated any remaining ambiguity about violent intentions while confirming worst-case threat assessment the housemates' reassurances had dangerously minimized. The physical assault represented predictable escalation endpoint for obsessive stalking that colleagues' ignorance advice had enabled through failure to implement protective interventions when behavioral warning signs first emerged. Garrett's successful physical subdual with assistance from responding housemates prevented potentially fatal outcome while providing evidence justifying police intervention that community tolerance had previously prevented. The defensive struggle represented survival necessity while highlighting dangerous inadequacy of passive avoidance strategies against determined predators whose obsessions drive continued escalation regardless of victim attempts to ignore or minimize threatening behaviors requiring active protective responses. Police discovery of Garrett's key in her possession provided concrete evidence connecting her to premeditated security breach enabling closet invasion. The physical evidence eliminated plausible deniability while documenting systematic planning that distinguished obsessive stalking from random threatening behavior, providing legal foundation for criminal charges that community tolerance had previously prevented through collective denial about threat severity and institutional responsibility for resident safety. The revelation of her identity as property manager's sister exposed institutional negligence that had enabled ongoing stalking through familial relationship exploitation and deliberate concealment of severe mental health issues. The family connection explained community tolerance and administrative inaction that had allowed dangerous individuals to maintain access to vulnerable student population despite behavioral patterns indicating clear threat to resident safety requiring protective intervention. Secret housing arrangement despite documented mental health problems represented gross negligence violating basic duty of care that property managers owe residents who deserve safe housing free from known threats. The concealment demonstrated prioritization of family loyalty over resident safety while exploiting institutional authority to provide stalker with victim access that independent housing search would never have permitted. Property manager facing criminal charges provided accountability for enabling dangerous situations through deliberate decisions that place financial interests or family obligations above legal responsibilities for resident protection. The legal consequences represented belated justice while highlighting systemic failures where institutional authorities prioritize convenience or personal relationships over safety obligations toward vulnerable populations dependent on their protective oversight. Garrett's survival despite attempted knife attack represented fortunate outcome that could easily have resulted in serious injury or death had timing or defensive responses differed slightly. The near-miss quality of survival created lasting psychological trauma while highlighting how close community tolerance and administrative negligence brought him to preventable violent victimization that proper institutional responses could have avoided through timely intervention. The lasting fear accompanying graduation preparation demonstrated successful psychological terrorism that achieved obsession objectives through trauma creation even though physical violence was ultimately prevented. The emotional damage represented permanent impact that would affect future housing decisions, interpersonal trust, and psychological well-being long after leaving cooperative environment that failed to provide promised safety and community protection. The experience taught harsh lessons about trusting institutional assurances and community judgments that minimize obviously threatening behavior through normalization and conflict avoidance. The education came at severe personal cost while providing knowledge about protective self-advocacy necessity when community or administrative responses proved inadequate for addressing clear threats requiring immediate intervention rather than tolerance and accommodation that enable continued boundary violations. The case highlighted broader patterns where mental health crises become community dangers when family members or institutions provide access to vulnerable populations rather than ensuring proper treatment and supervision. The systemic failure represented by this situation extends beyond individual negligence into societal inadequacies for managing severely disturbed individuals whose obsessions require professional intervention rather than community tolerance that enable progressive threats culminating in violent confrontations. The quiet suburban street represented idealized residential environment where a retired couple expected peaceful conclusion to working years surrounded by stable neighbors maintaining property values and social harmony through shared commitment to community standards. The suburban neighborhood setting promised security through geographic isolation from urban crime while providing social cohesion through demographic homogeneity and established property ownership patterns creating invested community. Quinn's arrival as young, flashy new homeowner introduced demographic disruption to establish neighborhood patterns while signaling potential lifestyle conflicts between generations with different values about appropriate residential behavior and social display. His youth and visible wealth presentation created immediate distinctiveness that could generate either admiration or resentment depending on interpersonal dynamics and community tolerance for demographic diversity. Friendly introductions represented normal social protocols for neighborhood integration, where established residents welcomed newcomers through casual conversation, establishing basic relationship foundations. The initial interaction provided opportunity for Quinn to demonstrate social awareness and community respect while enabling neighbors to evaluate his character and likely impact on residential environment quality and property values. Quinn's conversation topics focusing on wealth, stocks, and apparent financial success revealed either genuine enthusiasm for professional achievements or calculated self-presentation designed to establish status through wealth display. The financial emphasis created impression of material success while potentially triggering varied neighbor responses ranging from respectful admiration to uncomfortable awareness of economic disparities or suspicion about ostentatious display motivations. His apparent success evidenced through property ownership, vehicle choices, and lifestyle presentation suggested either legitimate professional achievement or unsustainable spending patterns that might presage future financial difficulties affecting property maintenance and neighborhood stability. The wealth display created ambiguous signals about character and long-term residential commitment that observant neighbors might interpret as warning signs or benign youth exuberance requiring patient tolerance. The retired couple's observation position provided optimal surveillance capability for monitoring Quinn's activities and social patterns while maintaining respectable distance appropriate for neighborly interest rather than intrusive nosiness. Their residential stability and temporal availability created natural neighborhood watch function that would prove crucial for documenting relationship dynamics that unfolded across street visibility. The suburban setting's acoustic and visual transparency enabled neighbors to witness Quinn's life drama despite his attempts at domestic privacy, demonstrating how residential architecture and community density can eliminate privacy illusions while creating involuntary audience for personal crises. The environmental factors would transform neighbors from distant observers into unwilling participants in psychological thriller that violated neighborhood peace assumptions through domestic violence intrusion. Quinn's initial presentation as a successful young professional created contrast with subsequent revelations about relationship instability and stalking victimization that would challenge assumptions about material success correlating with personal happiness or life management competence. The surface prosperity would prove inadequate protection against obsessive partner whose stalking capabilities demonstrated how wealth and security measures provide limited defense against determined predators who exploit emotional connections for gaining access to victims. The young blonde in white convertible created distinctive visual impression, suggesting either aesthetic confidence or calculated presentation designed to attract attention through stereotypical femininity displays. Her vehicle choice and appearance combined to create memorable identity that neighbors could easily track across visits, enabling pattern recognition that would prove crucial for understanding stalking dynamics that initially appeared as normal dating relationship. Her frequent visits initially suggested developing romantic relationship that casual observers might interpret as normal courtship behavior rather than obsessive attachment requiring Quinn's responsive engagement. The visit frequency created ambiguity about relationship dynamics where external observers couldn't distinguish between mutual attraction and one-sided pursuit until behavioral patterns clarified power imbalances and boundary violations characterizing stalking relationships. Public driveway argument provided first clear evidence of relationship dysfunction visible to community observers who had presumed Quinn's relationship represented normal romance rather than troubled dynamics involving conflict and control struggles. The visible confrontation violated suburban privacy norms while forcing neighbors into unwilling witness role for intimate disputes that should remain private but instead spilled into community awareness through acoustic and visual transparency. Her continued appearances during Quinn's absences revealed stalking pattern where visits served surveillance rather than relationship purposes, indicating obsessive monitoring of his activities and schedule tracking enabling her to maintain awareness of his movements despite his attempts to establish distance. The timing pattern demonstrated sophisticated stalking capability, utilizing various intelligence gathering methods for maintaining psychological control through persistent presence. Quinn's later revelation about spare key theft for copying purposes exposed calculated planning that transformed casual relationship access into unlimited property entry capability without Quinn's knowledge or consent. The key duplication represented premeditated boundary violation that enabled comprehensive surveillance while eliminating Quinn's ability to control when and how she accesses private spaces and possessions. Phone tracking disclosure revealed technical stalking capabilities that extended surveillance beyond physical presence into comprehensive digital monitoring, enabling real-time location awareness regardless of Quinn's attempts to create distance. The tracking technology exploitation demonstrated sophisticated stalking methodology that combined traditional physical surveillance with modern technological tools, creating omnipresent monitoring capability. Property rummaging behavior indicated obsessive information gathering designed to compile comprehensive knowledge about Quinn's life details, relationships, and activities through systematic invasion of privacy protected by home sanctity. The searching behavior suggested either paranoid jealousy or controlling personality, requiring total transparency from partner while rejecting reciprocal privacy respect that healthy relationships maintain. Hidden camera discovery represented ultimate privacy violation that transformed Quinn's home from personal sanctuary into comprehensive surveillance environment where every activity became recorded evidence for obsessive review. The camera installation demonstrated criminal stalking sophistication while creating profound psychological violation through retroactive awareness that intimate moments have been unwillingly documented for stalkers' obsessive consumption and potential manipulation. The siren sounds interrupting suburban tranquility signaled dramatic escalation from psychological stalking to violent confrontation that vindicated neighbors' growing concerns about relationship dynamics they had witnessed evolving across the street. The emergency response represented culmination of stalking patterns where psychological control methods proved insufficient for maintaining obsessive relationship, requiring physical violence to achieve domination objectives or punish perceived rejection. Ellie's arrest and handcuff provided visual confirmation of criminal behavior while validating community observations about troubling relationship dynamics that casual encounters had suggested, but polite restraint prevented neighbors from addressing directly. The law enforcement intervention represented official acknowledgement that private relationship matters had crossed into criminal territory, requiring state intervention for victim protection and public safety. Quinn's stretcher removal in blooded condition created disturbing visual evidence of violent severity while generating community trauma through exposure to graphic injury, reminders that residential environments should provide safety from such threats. The medical emergency demonstrated how quickly stalking situations can escalate to life-threatening violence when obsessive individuals face rejection or perceive loss of control over targeted victims. His surgical intervention status indicated serious injuries requiring extensive medical treatment, while highlighting how close the situation came to fatal outcome. The injury severity represented successful stalking culmination, where psychological terrorism evolved into physical assault designed to inflict maximum harm when other control methods failed to maintain obsessive relationship against victims' resistance attempts. Quinn's decision to move out for safety represented rational response to demonstrated threat while requiring abandonment of property investment and neighborhood relationships through trauma-driven relocation. The residential displacement demonstrated stalking's comprehensive life disruption that extends beyond immediate physical danger into forced lifestyle changes affecting housing stability, financial planning, and community connections that take years to establish. His regret about money-showing habits suggested painful recognition that visible wealth displays might have attracted initial predatory attention while providing stalker with information useful for manipulation and relationship initiation. The self-reflection represented natural but potentially misplaced blame assignment where victims often internalize responsibility for predator attraction rather than recognizing that stalkers actively seek and create victimization opportunities regardless of target behaviors. His permanent disappearance from neighborhood represented complete life disruption, where stalking victimization forced abandonment of established residents and community connections for safety through geographic relocation. The total displacement demonstrated stalking's devastating impact that achieves predator objectives of life destruction even when physical violence fails to achieve murder or permanent injury, creating lasting trauma through forced exile and loss of stability. The community impact of witnessing relationship violence transformed quiet suburban environment into site of traumatic experience that would affect neighbors' sense of security and trust in residential safety assumptions. The collective trauma represented stalking's radiating effect beyond direct victims into community consciousness, demonstrating how individual predatory behavior creates widespread fear affecting neighborhood cohesion and resident psychological well-being through proximity to violence. The narrator's relocation following bad breakup represented attempt at fresh start through geographic separation from relationship trauma and associated negative memories requiring environmental change for psychological recovery. The move to affluent family neighborhoods suggested desire for stability and safety through demographic selection, prioritizing established families over transient populations that might harbor predatory individuals or unstable dynamics. The next-door mansion housing created immediate awareness of significant wealth disparity while establishing neighbor relationship with individuals possessing substantial financial resources that might correlate with interesting life circumstances or potentially complicated dynamics. The property scale suggested either family wealth or remarkable personal financial success, requiring investigation through normal neighborly relationship building for understanding residential pattern implications. Damon's youth and finance industry identification created profiles suggesting either exceptional professional achievement or inherited wealth enabling luxury property ownership at age typically associated with career building rather than financial independence. His professional description provided plausible explanation for wealth while raising questions about work demands that might explain reclusive behavior patterns and social avoidance that quickly became apparent. Living alone in mansion created unusual circumstance where substantial property designed for family occupation housed single individual, suggesting either transitional life stage or deliberate isolation preference. The solitary occupation raised questions about family status, social connections, and psychological factors that might explain lifestyle choices departing from normal age-appropriate patterns involving roommates, partners, or family cohabitation. His reclusive behavior pattern established immediate distinctiveness from typical neighbor interactions where residential proximity normally generates casual social engagement through yard work conversations, mail collection encounters, or driveway greetings. The social avoidance suggested either extreme introversion, work demand preventing social availability, or deliberate isolation serving purposes that neighborly engagement might compromise through relationship building, creating expectations or scrutiny. Consistent hangout invitation dodging eliminated relationship building opportunities while creating growing mystery about his lifestyle and daily activities that normal social interaction would naturally reveal. The pattern avoidance suggested either social anxiety, time constraints, or calculated distance maintenance, preventing neighbor familiarity that might enable unwanted surveillance or questioning about activities requiring privacy protection from community awareness. The finance industry excuse provided plausible explanation for unusual schedule and limited availability while potentially concealing actual activities that legitimate professional demands couldn't explain. The cover story created acceptable narrative for neighborhood consumption while preventing deeper investigation into lifestyle patterns that normal professional work couldn't adequately justify without raising suspicion about illegal or ethically questionable activities. His mysterious persona created neighbor curiosity that would ultimately drive investigation when dramatic events shattered facade of normal wealthy recluse through disturbing revelations suggesting criminal activity rather than benign social awkwardness. The established pattern of secrecy would retroactively gain sinister significance when basement discoveries revealed activities requiring isolation from witness observation and community awareness that might trigger investigation or intervention. The 2 a.m. Wednesday timing created immediate abnormality for residential party activity, where weeknight late hours violated neighborhood norms about appropriate entertainment schedules respecting community sleep needs. The temporal anomaly suggested either complete disregard for neighbor consideration or deliberate party staging for purposes beyond normal social gathering requiring specific timing for operational rather than recreational reasons, creating phantom party mystery. Blaring party sounds combined with multiple parked vehicles and shoe pile created comprehensive party evidence that would normally indicate legitimate social gathering requiring neighbor tolerance despite late-night inconvenience. The sensory evidence suggested authentic entertainment activity while actually serving as elaborate deception designed to explain lights, sounds, and vehicle presence, concealing actual basement activities requiring auditory camouflage and guest number illusion. The unlocked door represented either negligent party security or deliberate access provision for participants expected to arrive without host greeting, indicating either casual social atmosphere or systematic operation requiring independent entry by multiple collaborators. The security lapse enabled narrators' investigative entry that would reveal staged nature of party evidence and disturbing basement reality requiring immediate escape and long-term mystery about witness activities. Interior discovery that party consisted solely of audio track rather than actual human celebration revealed elaborate deception designed to provide acoustic cover for activities requiring sound masking. The recording used demonstrated sophisticated criminal planning that created plausible explanation for noise complaints while enabling actual activities to proceed without acoustic detection by neighbors who assumed normal party sounds rather than staged audio camouflage. Empty rooms throughout house confirmed party fabrication while creating disturbing recognition that elaborate effort went into deception creation for purposes requiring neighbor misdirection about actual property activities. The comprehensive emptiness emphasized basement as sole activity location, while raising questions about why normal party couldn't serve social or operational purposes, requiring instead this elaborate staged environment. Basement descent revealed faint light and overwhelming bleach cleaner chemical smell, suggesting sanitation activities beyond normal cleaning intensity. The chemical concentration indicated either industrial cleaning process or evidence elimination following activities generating biological contamination, requiring aggressive sanitization. The smell intensity created immediate physical discomfort while triggering intuitive recognition of danger, requiring retreat before full situation comprehension. 3 older men in work gear, goggles, heavy gloves, and boots created image of professional cleaning crew or criminal disposal team working on tasks requiring protective equipment and coordinated effort. Their appearance suggested either legitimate hazmat remediation or criminal activity involving biological materials requiring careful handling and comprehensive protective measures during processing or disposal activities. Their fixation on something out of narrator's sight created final, disturbing elements, suggesting focal point of activity too disturbing for immediate description or comprehension. The concentrated attention indicated task requiring sustained focus and coordination, suggesting either technical complexity or psychological difficulty requiring collective effort for completion. The unidentified focal point became permanent mystery, driving subsequent investigation and speculation about Damon's fate. The narrator's immediate flight represented appropriate survival response to situation, exceeding exploration curiosity boundaries through obvious danger signals, requiring retreat without full understanding. The escape instinct activated through cumulative threat recognition, including staging, chemicals, protective equipment, and work of focus indicating activities requiring witness elimination for operational security, requiring immediate departure before discovery. Men spilling outside in search pattern confirmed that narrator's presence had been detected while their pursuit indicated serious intent to prevent witness testimony about basement activities. The manhunt demonstrated activities' illegal nature requiring aggressive witness management while creating successful escape urgency as narrator evaded capture through luck or speed advantage over pursuing workers unprepared for chase and protective equipment. The subsequent silence following pursuit created eerie aftermath where criminal operation apparently ceased without explanation or visible cleanup completion. The activity abandonment suggested either successful completion before interruption or operation termination triggered by witness exposure requiring immediate evacuation and evidence removal before law enforcement investigation that never materialized despite obvious criminal indicators. Damon and Vehicle's subsequent vanishing confirmed suspicions about his involvement in witness activities while raising questions about whether his disappearance represented flight, victimization, or voluntary absence unrelated to basement events. The complete absence eliminated information sources while leaving permanent mystery about identity, fate, and relationship to basement activities that might have involved him as perpetrator, victim, or unaware property owner. Overgrown lawn and accumulated packages created visible evidence of extended absence while contradicting normal vacation patterns through lack of property maintenance or mail holding arrangements. The neglect suggested either permanent departure, involuntary absence preventing property care, or deliberate abandonment following compromised operations requiring property evacuation without normal departure preparations. Neighbor claims about hearing no party contradicted narrator's vivid memory while creating gaslighting effects suggesting either mass denial, intimidation-induced silence, or genuine acoustic isolation preventing sound travel beyond immediate property. The collective denial created additional mystery about community awareness, involvement, or suppression of knowledge about basement activities potentially affecting multiple neighbors beyond narrator's lone witness testimony. Open questions about basement contents, party staging purposes, worker identities, and Damon's fate created permanent mystery that defied resolution through investigation limitations and witness testimony inadequacy. The unanswered elements represented lasting psychological burden where traumatic experience lacked closure through explanation or justice, leaving narrator with disturbing memories and permanent questions about near-miss encounter with activities potentially involving serious crimes up to murder.